Well, it's Groundhog Day. Again. And that must mean that I am Professor Robert E. G. Black, and this is the Groundhog Day Project.
It's one of those infinite time loop situations you might have heard about.
It's a thing where the same day keeps happening.
Time.
I wake up every day right here, right in Punxsutawney, and it's always February 2nd.
The last revision is what counts, apparently.
We are on minute 77 of Groundhog Day, which has Phil arriving at Gobbler's Knob with some pastries and coffee, and ends with Phil hearing some piano playing over the radio at the Tip Top Cafe. The Pennsylvania polka was playing as the minute ended previously, and so it ends that with now number 1. And then we get Phil arriving up at Gobbler's Knob into the fenced-off part that is for the media. Once again, not showing ID, he just arrives and they let him in. It's a very polite town, Woodstock, or Punxsutawney, rather. And Phil has this tray as he's approaching Larry and Rita. They haven't set up, so continuing on the goof I brought up last minute, the timing is all wrong. In the next, 15-20 seconds, the inner circle should be on stage, should be doing the prognostication. Because we've already had indicators of time with Phil Sign Girl and, basically Phil Sign Girl and the car in front of her over at the old man's corner. But, last minute I suggested that maybe we got a jump in that moment. We got Phil giving money to the old man, maybe that was yesterday. And we cut to a new day when we cut to Phil at Gobbler's Knob. Phil says, "Who wants coffee?" And he says it so loud, I think some of the other reporters should have looked. It would have been funny if they looked like they wanted some coffee. And he says, "Get it while it's hot." Personally, I would think that Larry and Rita already had coffee this morning, if they're coffee drinkers. I mean, they're staying right across the street from Gobbler's Knob. They had easy timing to just drink some coffee and be here. And since it's so easy to get into the media section of Gobbler's Knob, you don't even have to show ID. But they didn't have to get there early. They could have gotten there literally right before Phil does, because he shows up barely on time every time. Until now, where somehow the inner circle are behind schedule, which doesn't work. The prognostication is supposed to happen as close to dawn as possible. That's the point. You want the low angle of the sun so that the groundhog sees a shadow because it's sunny. There's a whole science thing about how this would actually work and how groundhogs do wake up in the middle of winter often. It's a melatonin production thing. I don't remember a lot of the detail of that science stuff, so go find that in the blog. I may have talked about it in the previous season. I can't remember how much I said about that on the show. But in the blog, I definitely talked about that. Or look up the holiday. Imbolc. Candlemas. Groundhog Day. Look up the science to groundhogs and hibernation. Oh, we are still hearing Pennsylvania polka, because it said it's going to entertain you, and this is when that line comes in. And Rita's like, "Okay, thanks, Phil." And then Phil holds the thing out to Larry. Before Larry takes anything, he says, "Skim milk, 2 sugars." That's how Larry takes his coffee. Did Phil find that out recently? Probably. But he found it out and he remembered it. That's good. Larry's like, "Yeah, thanks, Phil." And he takes the coffee. And then Phil's like, "Pastry?" He's kind of holding the tray up. Rita says, "We're just setting up." Phil says, "Pastry, Larry? Take your pick." "Thanks, Phil. Raspberry. Great." He's so excited. Larry does take a pastry. He's got coffee in one hand, pastry in the other. Then we get the line that is a reference to... This is Rubin's original, right? Or no, this is the second revision. They did film a version of this, which is interesting. Because there is a production photo of Bill Murray as Phil Connors kind of crouched down, pointing his mic down at a groundhog sitting on the ground. Although that groundhog does look a lot smaller than this one. Maybe it's fake. I don't know. Maybe it was just a promotional image that didn't get much play. But in the version in the script, which is either in Rubin's original or might be in the second revision, the groundhog, how they show the groundhog prognostication in the movie is kind of how it happens in real life. And it's also how it happens in Woodstock. I saw that one in person. I've seen video of the Punxsutawney one. They're pulling the groundhog out of this fake log where it supposedly lives. Punxsutawney Phil lives in a climate-controlled enclosure in the public library. Woodstock Willie, I don't know where he lives, but he doesn't live in the stump that they bring out for this event. Punxsutawney Phil does not live in that stump up there on Gobbler's Knob, in the middle of the city. So they pull him out of the thing, and, they pretend to talk to him, and then they read off one of their scrolls. How they decide which scroll, I'm not sure. Maybe it's just a fluke. Statistically, Punxsutawney Phil is wrong more often than he's right, which, if it's just a coin flip, that shouldn't be the case. Really, the reason he's wrong more often than he's not is because I think they try to make it about even, where he sometimes predicts more of winter and sometimes doesn't. But winter is pretty much always the same length-ish. Maybe it starts a little sooner, ends a little later, whatever. But it's always the same length. It's always winter. But in the version in the script, there's this thing where the groundhog comes out of the thing, gets away from the handler, and kind of runs across the stage off to one side. And was it Phil predicts it? No, this is in Ruben's original, because his first thing is he's predicting it. Where he's like, it's going to run over there, it's going to burp, it's going to look at the crowd. And so Phil gets in that position later so that it runs directly over to him, and then he puts the mic down. Not that it has anything to say, because it's groundhog.
This is where it gets complicated. See, I'm conflating two different versions of the scene that aren't the version we see in the movie. In Ruben's original, we start with Phil is already in the loop. He's predicting things, reacting to stuff ahead at the Cherry Street, interacting with Ned, getting to Gobbler's Knob, and then he starts his report and says, "Once a year, the eyes of the nation turn here to this tiny hamlet in Pennsylvania to watch a master at work. The master? Punxsutawney Phil, the world's most famous weatherman. The groundhog who, legend has it, can predict the coming of an early spring." Rita turns to Larry. This is impressive. So far, so good. Phil continued, "In just a moment, we will see the groundhog peek its head out of the hole here on Gobbler's Knob, look left, look right, step out of the hole, run around to this side, look at the crowd, burp, and run back into the ground." Rita, "We're fired." Phil looks at his watch. Phil, "Okay, and here we go." Phil gestures with his hand. The groundhog sticks his head out of the hole, looks around, steps out of the hole, runs around directly over towards Larry's camera. As he stands there, his body casts a long shadow. The groundhog looks at the camera, lets out a squeak, and runs back into the ground. Rita and Larry have their mouths open, the crowd cheers. Phil continued, "And now the official of these proceedings, Mr. Buster Green, will interpret the weather report." Blah, blah, blah. That's the version from Danny Rubin's original. Then we have the version from the first revision, which I only recently learned exists. Rubin didn't even remember this was out there. This was put in Scenario Magazine, Volume 1, Number 2, Spring 1995. But it's similar. In just a moment, we will see the groundhog peek its head out of the hole here on Gobbler's Knob, look left, look right, step out of the hole, run around to the side, look at the crowd, burp, and run back into the ground, blah, blah, blah. Okay. They still hadn't been to Punxsutawney for the research purposes. Rubin had just talked to someone on the phone. So, things change once they know how it actually works. So here's the version in the second revision. A Groundhog Club official kneels at the burrow and ceremoniously knocks on the small wooden door, then opens it and retreats. Phil, and here's the big moment we've all been waiting for. Let's just see what Mr. Groundhog has to say. The groundhog sticks his head out, looks around, steps out of the hole, and runs over to the other side of the mound, about as far away from the cameras as he can get. Phil, hey, over here, you little weasel. Larry zooms in as far as he can, but the best he can manage is a close-up of the groundhog's back. The groundhog stands there a moment, his body casting a long shadow, then he lets out a squeak and runs back into the hole. Phil, great shot, huh folks? Well, that was certainly worth the trip. Now we'll be hearing from Mr. Buster Green, president of the Punxsutawney Groundhog Club, the so-called seer of seers who will interpret for us. And of course then later, he will suggest that they go over to the other side of the mound. Here's the version from the final version of the script. Phil, I bumped into Buster Green. He kind of runs this thing, and he tipped me off that we might get a better shot over there. Rita, really? Phil, maybe we should go for it. What do you think? Rita, sounds good to me. Larry? Larry, sure, why not? Rita, all right. Thanks, Phil. Good work. She reaches for an equipment case. Phil, I'll get that. Phil helps Larry carry the camera gear. Phil to Larry. You and I never talk, Larry. You got kids? Larry looks suspicious. Rita looks on, reevaluating Phil. Oh, we don't actually get the change in the scene in the final revision, huh? Yeah, so with 5 different versions of the script, I'm not finding the moment. I thought it was in there. Maybe it's just the part from the original where he gets what he wants. But the implication from the production still, though maybe it's fake, maybe that's a fake groundhog they set up just for that photo, is that maybe they filmed a version of the scene where they do move over to the other side and the groundhog was supposed to run over to them. In actual filming, I can't imagine that they got the groundhog to do that. So it was probably just a promotional still with a fake groundhog. Or a Photoshop kind of deal. But that's the idea. That is what this moment is in reference to. Phil predicting a better shot, except that better shot depends on a different version of how the entire ceremony is happening. We don't see them get that better shot. We just see that Phil is paying more attention.
This is what this moment is a reference to. As he's like, see, I was just talking with Buster Crane. I don't think that happened. Although, that could be the thing I was talking about last minute about Phil's timing, getting in the square. That could be the thing we cut for. Maybe he did stop and talk to... No, he doesn't talk to them. He didn't talk to him before, for sure. And I don't think he talked to him today. I think he's lying. But he's lying in a good way. He's just kind of having fun. See, I was just talking with Buster Green. He's the head groundhog honcho. And he said if we set up over here, we might get a better shot. What do you think? Personally, I think they should probably stay right where they are because they're getting pretty good shots. And at the moment, there's a lot of space about where they're standing, where there's a bunch of reporters off to the right already. But whatever. Rita says, sounds good. Phil says, Larry, what do you think? It might be the first time Phil has ever asked for Larry's opinion. And Larry's like, yeah, let's go for it. Rita says, good work, Phil. And Phil says, maybe we'll get lucky. And they're picking up stuff to move to a different spot. Phil says, let me give you a hand with the heavy stuff. He grabs the camera because Larry at the moment has coffee in one hand, pastry in the other. And says, no, you got your coffee. I'll get it. Like, he doesn't let Larry take it from him, and he carries it. And then as he's walking away, he's like, we never talked, Larry. Do you have kids? Phil's taking an interest in Larry, and that's great. Is he going to have genuine questions and genuine conversation? I think he's going to, but I'm not sure how the timing's going to be, because based on the song that was just playing, Pennsylvania Polka, regardless of the goof with the timing of him getting coffee and pastries when he arrived at Old Man's Corner at the exact same time, and Phil Girl was there, and some reason Ned wasn't. How'd that work? Never mind all that weird timing. Pennsylvania Polka plays, it ends, Inner Circle starts. The prognostication thing. They don't now. The song has stopped. Phil is talking to Larry and Rita, and the timing is all wrong. And I'm a little disappointed now. I didn't want to get into this, but that's what it is. So is Phil being genuine here and actually caring about Larry? Is he trying to care about Larry for sure? Yes. Are they going to have time for a whole conversation right now? No, I don't think so, because the Inner Circle apparently is slightly behind schedule and needs to get the fuck up on stage and get on with the prognostication. But maybe they can talk after. Maybe Phil today will be like, yeah, we can't go into Pittsburgh. The blizzard's in the way. Roads are closed. We don't know what happens in between this moment and next minute when Phil goes to Mary's house. Well, we see a little bit here. Could be the same day. Probably the same day. By the end of this minute, we saw Phil at the counter in the diner. It's the Tip Top, but we haven't seen enough of the Tip Top to see where this counter is. The restaurant from the other corner where Phil's table is always looks so small. But basically there is a counter. This counter is... Where is this counter? Where's this shelf? Where's this radio? Where is he? It's confusing because from the other side it feels like there's some tables along the wall on both walls because this is on a corner of the block, right? This is the corner of the building. So tables along the wall, that's where the family with Mike sits. That's where Phil's table is. That's where Gus and Ralph are. Nancy's table, the other guy's table back behind her. And then there's a group of booths in the middle. There's some booths off to the right, which is like where Debbie and Fred are. Wait, is theirs the only table on that side? Yeah. So the counter actually has to be back near... Is this a different set? No, because when Phil is in the diner with the old man later, it is the diner. Shit. Where are we? No, there's a guy in the back picking up, like, bussing a table, right? Is that Bill? The waiter? Or is that the waiter who drops the tray? The apron's similar. This is the diner. Yeah, it's really hard to see the back of the diner at any point in this movie, because the closest we get to it is when Phil and Rita sit down at the end of the God Day scene. Rita does the little, you like boats but not the ocean. But at that point, the table beyond them with the old man with the red hat, and the kitchen, where I assume that's Carl, Doris's brother, cooking, is kind of blurry, like just how the scene is focused. But I think the counter is back there. I think the counter is literally right in front of the window into the kitchen.
Confirmed it really quick, minute 69, as they go to sit at the table. It's blurry and never quite clear, I think, in any of the shots, but right behind the old man with the red hat, right in front of the window into the kitchen, there are people with their backs to the rest of the restaurant, which means they're sitting at the counter.
But this angle in this minute, we can't see it because it's out of frame to the left, would be the window into the kitchen where Carl is. Because if you look at the wall over by the radio, those are those paper groundhogs up there, right? And the guy bussing tables, he's basically in about the same location where the tray was dropped earlier. Yeah, it's definitely the diner. It's just the geography of the diner is not something I really ever examined in detail, like I did Phil's room. Because Phil's room was more interesting in the fact that they seem to have gotten it backward. The diner is a physical location they built, not based on any existing things, so it works. That it looks smaller than it is from the one angle is just camera work, depth of field, focus, or I don't know, cameras either. Whatever term you need to use for that. Anyway, that's all I got for minute 77. Phil has now heard some piano music. I would point out that the sound design or sound edit, whatever, in this moment is maybe a little off. I don't get the audio impression that radio that we see on the shelf in the background is playing this music. Phil does look around like he's hearing the music, but the music should have a slightly different quality that makes it sound like it's coming from a radio, and it doesn't have that. This sounds like score. This sounds like music added to the soundtrack, unlike every time we click into I Got You, Babe. Click, and it sounds like it's coming from that alarm clock. This doesn't sound like it's coming from that radio, but the implication is it is coming from the radio. Phil hears the piano. He's sitting here trying to improve himself. He's reading some books. I don't remember what books offhand now, but I did figure out what these books were and talked about them. I know one's a book about Levi Strauss. I think the one sitting there, not the one he's got open, is about Levi Strauss. He's going for improvement finally. He's reading books. He hears piano music, and next minute he's going to do something about it. Not that he's going to go turn off the music, but he's going to go learn how to play the piano. We'll talk about that next minute. Till then, I guess, I don't know, go learn how to play the piano. No, just go listen to something good and go read a book. Go sit by yourself at a counter, in a restaurant, a diner, a bar, and just enjoy some food and read something. Not on your phone.
Knew you were going to say that.
This has been a production of Lemming Drops Studio. You can find links to more at lemmingdrops.com or join the Facebook group Lemming Drops Studio Tour. Also, you can support all my shows at patreon.com/lemmingdrops.
What is wrong in the end which never comes? Or which comes again and again? Laughing, like waves.
Since the Big Bang set everything in motion, everything that happens in this universe has to be the way it is. Particles unfolding the way they're destined to.
How do you sleep at night? You've never seen Groundhog Day?
Yeah, Groundhog Day is not a documentary.
Remember when Groundhog Day was just a movie?